So I grew up in South Africa, and when I was 16 years old, I was bullied at school very badly, to the point where my parents had to pull me out of school because I was so traumatized. And that was back in the early 90s. So there was no such thing as cyberbullying. It was good, old-fashioned traditional bullying. And it was so bad that one of the girls who was bullying me actually organized like a gang of about 8 girls, and they would literally wait for me outside the school gates after class every single day and beat me up. And they used to beat me up so badly that sometimes I couldn't even go to school the next day because I had so many bruises and I was so sore. And the worst part of it all is that the teachers knew that this was going on, and they did nothing to stop it. In fact, some of the teachers were just blatantly racist, and they would tell me things like, "You're just a stupid colored girl, no one likes you, you're ugly, you're going to be fat and ugly forever. You'll never amount to anything in life." So I was bullied by both the students and the teachers, and to make matters worse, I wasn't even in a privileged position. I grew up in poverty. My mom raised 3 kids on her own. She worked as a domestic worker, and we lived in a very small shack with no electricity or running water. So I didn't have any money to buy things like books or stationery. And I wasn't allowed to go to the school library because the bullies would say that we're not allowed to touch the books because we're dirty and the books are clean. So I didn't have any access to books, and I hated school. I wanted to drop out of school so badly. But my mom, although she didn't have much education herself, she always told us that education is the most important thing. She said, if you don't have an education, you're not going to get anywhere in life. Your life will be so difficult. So she begged me to stay in school. She said, please just stay in school for me. Even though I hate school so much, I stayed on because I didn't want to disappoint my mom. But I failed all my classes in high school except for math. And then when I finished high school, I thought, okay, now I'm going to go travel the world and become a flight attendant like I've always dreamed of. But the bullies had made my life such a misery, and the school had done nothing to stop them. So my parents had to pull me out of school. They didn't want me to go back because they were scared that the bullying would continue and get even worse. So I was out of school for about 6 months. I was only 16 years old and I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't have any qualifications. I couldn't get a job, and I was so depressed. I didn't think that I would ever be happy again. I honestly felt like my life was over. Then, one day, I saw a poster at the local community center advertising a course called Basic Computer Training. And I thought, wow, computers. Computers are really popular right now. I think it's probably something trendy that everyone needs to learn. So I went along to the class and I found out that the teacher was a white male who had studied computer science at university. He was probably about 28 years old, which was like really old to me back then. And I sat down and I thought, oh, this is going to be so boring. This guy's going to talk about computers and stuff and I'm going to fall asleep. But after the first lesson, I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I've never known that you could do so much with a computer. And this teacher was so passionate, and he made learning about computers really fun. So I continued with that computer course, and I ended up getting a job at a call center because I learned basic computer skills. And then I started saving up money to buy my first personal computer. Now, this was way before social media. The internet was extremely expensive, and most people didn't even have dial-up. So I bought a second-hand computer, and I saved up enough money to buy a second-hand laptop, and I taught myself how to use the internet. And then I started this website called Chat, Commune AU. It was an online chat room. And I remember the first time I logged on to the chat room and I saw all these people chatting. I thought, wow, the internet is amazing. This is so cool. I can chat to people anonymously without them knowing who I am. So I started going on to the chat room every day. And that's when I met a guy named Mark. Mark was studying computer science at university, and I was so infatuated with him. I thought he was the most intelligent man in the world. He was so smart, and we used to chat online every day. And he would tell me all about what he was learning at uni. And I would say, wow, that sounds so fascinating. You must be really clever to be able to learn all that stuff. And he told me that he was also doing a research project on human intelligence. And he said, gee, I wish I could study human intelligence because I'm really interested in psychology. And I said, well, why don't you study psychology? And he said, well, I'm already studying computer science and I don't want to waste time starting a new degree. Then he said, but you know what? Since you're so smart, why don't you take my psychology test? So he sent me this huge questionnaire to fill in. And I filled in all these questions about things like, how many siblings do you have? What grade are you in? How old are your parents? Do you have any pets? And I filled in all these details about myself. And then he asked me some questions about psychology. Like, what do you think is the purpose of life? What makes you happy? What is intelligence? And I answered all those questions. And then he asked me some questions about my childhood, and I told him about being bullied at school. And I remember typing to him, I said, the bullying was so bad that my parents had to pull me out of school. And then he replied, it sounds like you were abused. I said, no, it wasn't abuse. The other kids were just jealous of me because I was pretty. And he said, no, you were abused. And I was like, what? No, I wasn't abused. The other kids were just jealous. And he said, you are minimizing your trauma. So he made me feel guilty about being a victim of bullying. And then he told me that he had some shocking news to tell me. He said, I've been studying psychology for years, and I've come to the conclusion that women are inferior to men. They're too emotional and irrational. So he dumped me. And he said, look, I'm sorry, but you're just not smart enough to be with someone like me. You're just a dumb girl. And then he blocked me on the chat room. And I was devastated. I felt like my whole world had crumbled around me. I felt so hurt. I thought, why is he treating me this way? We've been friends for so long. But then something inside me just snapped. I became angry, and I decided that I wanted to prove to Mark and everyone else that women are none inferior. I wanted to show them that women can be just as smart as men, if not smarter. So I went back to school and I got my GED. And then I went to college and I got a scholarship to study psychology. I graduated with honors and I became a psychologist. And I started doing really well. I was helping people with their problems. I was going to conferences and I was publishing research papers. And I was making a difference in the world. And then I remembered what Mark had said to me, that I was too emotional to be a psychologist. So I went back to school and I got a PhD in neuroscience. And then I became a neuroscientist. And I was proving to everyone, including Mark, that women can be whatever they want to be. And I'm still going to this day. I'm still teaching students and I'm still researching and I'm still publishing papers. Now I'm also the director of a foundation. We help victims of bullying. And we also teach people all over the world about bullying prevention. We run workshops in schools and companies, and we even have a program in prisons. It's called Building Empathy Through Neuroscience, and it's based on my story. The prisoners love it. So today, thanks to the support of my mom and the power of education, I'm traveling all over the world, standing in front of thousands of people, helping other people, making a difference in the world. Who would have thought that the little colored girl who couldn't read or write and who was bullied at school would one day be a doctor with a PhD and a famous author and a speaker and an activist? And it's all because I refused to give up. I refused to let the bullies win. Thank you.